who are here today were here last year when I came to meet you? A couple of you? Okay, great. Well, hopefully I won't just say the same things I said last year, but some of the things we talked about last year I think are so important that I think we might share them with some of your friends who may not have had the chance to be here last year. And how many who are here are in the third grade? Third grade, great. Do we have any fourth graders here? Oh, wow. And how about fifth grade? Oh boy, okay. Well, great. So we have people in different classes. Let me tell you a little bit about who I am. I know I was just introduced, but let me give you a couple other tidbits about who I am and why I really enjoy the opportunity to speak to students of your age. My name is Maricela. I am originally from Austin. And my family has been in Texas since the 1700s for a really, really long time. And we actually came to Texas, my family, they were part of Texas that founded the state. And the reason I tell you that is one thing I love about this elementary school is that there is such a diverse group of people that attend this school. And my family, they were from Spain and then resided in Texas when it used to be Mexico. So we are Mexican American, but my ancestors actually signed the Declaration of Independence of Texas. Isn't that pretty cool? So they've been here a long time. And the reason I share that with you is I think that with all of you who are here today, you are going to create the history of the state of Texas. And that may sound like a pretty amazing thing. But when I think about where my family has come from and their Mexican-American roots in Texas for many, many generations, I bet that my parents never thought that I would go to college and law school and would one day sit here talking to a group of students like you. You one day will be standing in front of a group of students talking about who you are and where you're from and how you developed all of your great opportunities. I know that's true. And let me tell you why I think that that's true. When I was about your age, I didn't know many lawyers. We didn't have any lawyers in my family. Does anybody in here have any lawyers in their family? A couple people. Well, when I was your age, I didn't have any lawyers who were my relatives. But I had the opportunity to meet lawyers through my parents and their friends. And it was by sitting down with people like you and I are doing here today and talking about different opportunities that made me realize that I wanted to be a lawyer. And as you are sitting here today, I want to tell you a little bit about what I had to do in order to open doors, go to college, go to law school, enter the legal profession, because I want you to envision yourself standing here when your day comes, because I know that it will. I absolutely know that it will. So I grew up in Austin, and I have a younger sister and an older brother. My brother's a firefighter. I bet some of you here would much rather listen to him talk about his firefighting stories. Great, great person. And we grew up in Austin, and then after I graduated from high school, I went to Boston College. Who in here knows where Boston is? Oh, wow. Okay, great. And after growing up and going to school in Boston, I went to law school in Washington, D.C. Anybody here ever heard of Washington, D.C.? Yeah. Anybody here ever heard of President Obama who lives in Washington, D.C.? Very good. The way that I was able to do those things, the things that I had to do in order to create those opportunities started when I was your age. And I mean that very sincerely. When I was in the third grade, I remember my third grade teacher's name. My third grade teacher's name was Mrs. Sullivan. So those of you who are sitting here who are third graders, your future is beginning right now. And let me tell you what I remember about Mrs. Sullivan. Mrs. Sullivan was an amazing teacher because she believed in me. There were subjects, math, that I was not very good at. But Mrs. Sullivan believed in me. And she insisted that we as third graders did something for ourselves. And let me tell you what that was. She insisted that we create our own expectations. Now, who in here knows what the word expectations means? Yeah? Now, there are quite a few more students here than last year, so I don't know if I can call on you. But let me tell you what my idea of an expectation is. An expectation is something that you believe that you can do, and then you set a goal and you achieve it. And one thing that you as third graders and fourth graders and fifth graders, if I can give you one little piece of advice that you take after you leave this great, this room and after we're speaking, one thing that Miss Sullivan insisted that we do, and that I'm going to recommend that you do, is set your own expectations. Do not let a sibling, a friend, a teacher tell you what you can achieve. Do not do that. When I was in the third grade, I didn't know lawyers. When I was in the third grade, I'd never been to Boston. When I was in the third grade, I'd never been to Washington, D.C. But I set my own expectations. I decided that I was going to study. I decided that I was going to do things that were challenging so that I could create my own opportunities. And so many times I think when we're young and we hear what people say about us, and school is hard, and you got to get up early in the morning, and maybe you have to stay at school late because mom and dad are working. Set your own expectations for yourself. Now, one other thing we talked about last year that I want to talk a little bit about is goals. Anybody here know what a goal is? Yeah? You're in the front, so you're going to have to tell me. What's a goal? What do you think a goal is?
A goal is when you...
Can you stand up? Look, she's almost as tall as me. I'm going to have to call on some shorter kids or get some higher shoes. What's a goal?
A goal is when you make soccer.
A soccer goal. Okay, that's one kind of goal. Well, another kind of goal that you can set is something that you want to do. So let's say in the third grade, you are reading a certain kind of book, right? Maybe a chapter book, and you set the goal that by the end of the year, you're going to learn how to read that book. That's a goal. Well, let me tell you about some of the kinds of goals that I set for myself. When I was young, I was very interested in reading, but like I mentioned, I wasn't so good at math. And so goals are things you set for yourself that you're going to achieve. And it is so important that we begin when we're as young as you are in your own education, setting your own goals for yourself. So let's say maybe you set the goal that I'm going to enter the science fair this year, right? I'm going to learn to do multiplication by myself this year. Setting those goals in the third grade will allow you to then achieve things in the fourth grade. And then it opens doors for you as you get older. And I want to tell you a couple little stories because I know that you hear these kinds of things all the time. But I want to tell you about a couple stories about goals that I've set for myself, starting from when I was in the third and the fourth grade. So let me give you an example. When I was in the fifth grade, I went to a small school and we had a basketball team. And we were the St. Austin's Eagles. And I told my parents I wanted to be on the basketball team. Now, I'm not very tall. I wasn't very fast. Wasn't the most obvious person to be on the basketball team, but I decided that was something that I wanted to do. And so I did not let other people set expectations for me. I didn't let people tell me, now Maricela, you're only 4'8". Maricela, you're not very fast. Maricela, you're not the most athletic person. I didn't listen to those people. What I decided is that I wanted to be on that basketball team, and I worked hard. And what that means is that I decided that I was going to go to practice. I decided even if I didn't start, that I would go to all the games. I decided that even though I wasn't the star on the team, that I was going to be supportive. And I was on the basketball team, and I played for 4 years. Not the greatest player, but I did it. And I achieved the goal because I set my own expectations for myself. Now, something else that I would like for you to think about is, as you get into school and you start learning about subjects, A lot of times, your teachers will tell you, you need to go home right after school and do your homework. Do your teachers ever tell you that? Before you go outside to play soccer, before you go outside to play with your friends, you need to go home immediately and do your homework. Now, how many people in here do that? Good job. Well, let me tell you something. One thing that I believe is that what you're doing today, the skills that you're learning in school, when your teachers tell you that you need to go home right after school and do your homework before you do anything else, if you can learn to do that today, you have already put yourself in front of so many other students that don't have the opportunity to have teachers like yours that are telling you to do that. Do you know that I was like you, I had great teachers like Miss Sullivan who told me, you know, when you get home from school, the first thing you need to do is do your homework. Do not procrastinate. That's something that I learned in the 3rd grade that I took with me. And so when I went to high school and school got more challenging, learning those kinds of skills actually put you a little bit ahead of other students who may not have that habit. And that's something that's very important. Because by doing that, you're going to learn how to be a better student. And so when work gets harder and it gets a little bit more challenging, you're going to have the skills to do what you need to do to succeed. So those are a couple things. I'm going to get all that in the beginning because I think it's very important to learn about the kinds of things you can be doing right now when you're in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade to prepare yourself and to open doors for what might come. And now that I've gotten all that out of the way, let's talk about some other kind of fun things. So I'm a lawyer. How many people here have ever been in a courtroom? A couple people. Well, I want to tell you a little bit about what I do because I think it's pretty exciting. I enjoy it. And I'm hoping by telling you a little bit about what lawyers do, maybe you, someone in this room will decide, you know what, maybe one day I'd like to be a lawyer too. And we need good lawyers. We need good people who are hardworking and who care about people to be lawyers, okay? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I do. So I practice law here in Dallas. I also go to other cities. I was in Austin on Friday practicing law. And what I do is I work in the court system in the area of employment. So how many people here have a parent or a mom or a dad who has a job? That's right. Well, when they go to work every day, there's certain rules in the workplace. They have to show up to work on time, they have to do their job well, and they have the right by their employers that they get paid on Friday and that they're taken care of and they're treated well. Well, one of the things that I do is I protect individuals, people, your mom, your dad, maybe your grandparents. When they go to work, if for some reason at their job they're not being treated very nicely, maybe they believe that they're breaking the rules, I work with the people who are in their jobs to make sure that everybody's abiding by the rules. And sometimes that's not happening. So I have to go to court and I stand in front of a judge. Anybody here ever met a judge? I get to stand in front of the judge and I get to try to help people with problems at work by being their spokesperson. So I can stand up and I know the rules and I know the law and I get to communicate to the court why this person needs a little bit of help in the court system. And they need to make sure that everybody's being treated fairly. Now, one thing that I do as a lawyer is I also help people who don't speak English and that speak mainly Spanish. Does anybody in here speak Spanish? That's great. Wow. Wow, that's wonderful. We have a lot of future professionals in this room because it is so important that if you speak Spanish that you continue to do that because there are a lot of people who live in our communities who don't speak English very well and they need people like you and like me to help them. Because when you don't speak the language, it makes it a little bit more difficult. And so one thing that I do is I use my Spanish at work all of the time. I use my Spanish by helping people who may not understand the rules of society, maybe they don't understand the laws, who speak only English, or they don't speak English. I help them. And so there are things that you do today. There are things you're learning, maybe keeping up your Spanish, learning your work ethic. Those are things that you're going to be able to use in order to be whatever you want, and maybe some of you will be a lawyer. Now, last year we talked a little bit about the fun things about being a lawyer and the difficult things about being a lawyer, and I got a lot of really good questions from the audience. And I remember that someone was asking me, what happens if you're in court and the judge doesn't agree with you? One of your really smart classmates asked me that. What do you do? And we talked about how as you're growing up, you're going to have challenges. And things are sometimes easy and sometimes they're not very easy. Sometimes you win and sometimes you lose, right? And we talked about how sometimes when I'm in court, that's really difficult because you're trying to help people, and sometimes maybe the judge won't agree with you. But it's hard work, and it's standing by what you believe in and working hard so that you can help people that gets you through those days, even when you don't win. So one thing I want to talk to you guys about, we've talked a little bit about law, and we've talked a little bit about some of the skills that you need in order to be a lawyer. I want to talk to you a little bit about what you want to do. Now, how many of you that are in the third grade are starting to read books that have chapters? Some chapter readers? Good job, good job. And when you started reading chapter books, was it pretty difficult? Yep. And what do you do to read chapter books a little bit better? You practice, don't you? Now, one thing that we talked about last year, and I think is so important, is sometimes when we do things like reading chapter books, what about math? In, let's see, the fourth grade, are you doing division? Yep, y'all are doing division. And is it hard sometimes? No? Oh, we've got all the smart kids in the front row. No? Is it pretty easy for you? Yeah? What other kinds of things do you do in math? What do you do?
Multiplication.
Multiplication, okay. Who in here thinks multiplication is pretty difficult? Boy, we've got all the smart kids at San Jacinto. What do you do that's in school?
In the learn.
In the what?
The learn.
Oh, yeah? Well, I guess you guys are a little bit smarter than I was in math, because when I was your age, some of those things were a little bit difficult for me. And I want to tell you a story about a friend of my dad's. This is a pretty interesting story. So my dad grew up in San Antonio, and he had a friend when he was growing up, and maybe his friend wasn't as good at math as some of the kids in the front row here. And this individual, his name is Juan Vasquez. When he was in school, he wasn't very good at math. He had some difficulty with it. And he had a teacher who was nothing like the great teachers at this school, because I know the teachers at this school are very encouraging. But he had a teacher tell him that, you know, Juan, you're not very good at math. You probably won't be able to go to college. Can you imagine that? Well, Juan, he didn't listen to that. Like we talked about, he set his own expectations. And he worked even harder at math because he was told, you're not very good at it. And you know what ended up happening to Juan? Juan went to college. Juan went to law school. And now he's a judge in a tax court. That's a lot of math. And the reason that Juan was able to do that is because he didn't listen to people who tried to set expectations for him, right? So some of you guys, you guys are really good at math, but I bet there's some in here that maybe sometimes when you're learning a new subject, it might be a little bit difficult, maybe a little complicated, and a little frustrating, yeah? I remember going through that. And I think it's so important when you're at your grade level to start taking ownership whenever there's a subject, whether it's division, word problems, maybe writing. Does anyone in here do book reports? If there's something that you're doing that's difficult, I think it's important that you realize that people like me who maybe have already gone through school, things were difficult for me too. I didn't always make all of the A's, but when I had a subject that was difficult, I worked harder at it. And that's so important. Because sometimes when we're in school and something doesn't come very easily for us, we try to ignore it or put it to the last. But it's so important that you take ownership of those challenges. Make that one subject. Make that one difficult project yours and challenge yourself. And if you do that and if you work hard, you're going to open lots of doors. You're going to open so many doors for yourself. And it's not just doors like me in the legal profession. Anybody in here ever thought about going into science? Who likes science? Oh, that's great. Look at that. That's great. We need scientists here. We need lots of people who are interested in science. Anybody in here ever thought about being a doctor? Oh my goodness. Very good. What about an architect? Anybody in here like to draw? I think we've got the most talented kids in all of Dallas that are all in this auditorium. That's great. Now, all of you that have all of these expectations, do any of you in this room sometimes have subjects that are challenging, that are a little bit difficult? Yeah. And that gets kind of frustrating. And what do you do? Does anybody want to tell me what they do when they have a challenging subject? Let's see. I'm going to have to go to somebody that's kind of close. Here, you come over here. You're close enough, yeah. You don't want to? Let's see. Do you want to? Come here. You're going to give me some insight. What do you do when something's challenging?
Work hard at it.
You work harder at it. That's right. That's right. It's so important. And you know, even today, I practice law and I have 2 kids and I do all of these things, but even today, things are challenging. And sometimes it is very difficult to stay on task. But you're learning right now the most important skill, the most important thing that you can learn when you're in school right now is just to work hard and not to be discouraged. You know, someone told me recently that sometimes it's when you don't do well in a subject or sometimes when something doesn't go your way, that's what builds your character. That's what makes you a stronger person. And I have many examples of that. I'm sure Tom knows what I'm talking about, where sometimes you work really hard at something and you think you want something, and maybe it doesn't work out the way that you want. So maybe even you have a book report or a science fair project, and you work really hard at it, and you think, I'm going to get the best grade, or it's going to work the way that I want, and maybe it doesn't. But sometimes it's just that process of working hard. That's building your character. That's what's going to set you apart from other people. Because that's the one thing that regardless of the outcome, you can take ownership of. It's the hard work that you put into doing something, right? And sometimes I think that's probably a little bit difficult to do, but it's the most important part. So now last year I had a little bit more of an opportunity to take questions because there were fewer people, but I'm going to try to do it anyway because I could talk all day, but I bet there are things that you want to ask me. So who has a question for me? Oh, that hand went up very quickly. Okay. Do you want to come over here and ask your question?
What do you do for a lawyer?
What do I do as a lawyer? Well, I go to court and I argue. Last Friday I was in Austin in a hearing and I was asking the judge to do something that I thought was right, and she disagreed with me. She didn't agree with me, but I go to court and I write briefs. A brief is like a report, and I write those and I send them to the courts and ask them to look at the law like I would like them to look at it. So it's fun. I do a lot of speaking. Let's see, what's your question?
Was there a lot of people who made fun of you when you were little?
Oh boy, that's a great question. Were there a lot of people that made fun of me when I was little? Have you been talking to my brother? I've absolutely, that is a really good question. I think that when I was young, I always tried to have a good sense of humor about myself. So I think sometimes people would kind of make fun of me. I was kind of small, and there's a joke in my family that nobody would ever start eating until Maricela spilled the milk. I was kind of clumsy sometimes. But you know what? I think that one thing that you can do for yourself when people make fun of you, something that is so, so important, is to have self-confidence. Because even when people would kind of jab at Maricela and make fun of me, you know, one thing that I always believed in was myself. And I think sometimes maybe 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, sometimes people can maybe be a little bit mean and make fun of people, but if you believe in yourself, if you have self-confidence, you just don't pay attention to it. Does that make sense? So, oh, certainly. Oh, people made fun of me all the time. I was an easy target. Yes, ma'am. What's your question?
What is the favorite part of the job?
My favorite part of my job. You know, my favorite part of my job is when I am given the opportunity to stand in a courtroom in front of a jury. Does anybody here know what a jury is? Those of you that watch TV sometimes maybe see on TV. When you're in court, the great thing about the American judicial system, about the way our legal system works, is that if you ever have to go to court, you have the right to tell your story to people who are just like you. And that's called a jury. And as citizens, maybe sometimes your mom or your dad or your aunts or uncles will get something that's called a jury duty notice, where they have to go to court and listen to someone else's story. Okay? So let's say maybe you're in a car wreck and you think that the person that hit you needs to pay you some money for that car wreck. You have the right to go to court and stand in front of people and tell them your story. And my favorite, absolutely favorite part of my job is when I get to go to court on behalf of a person who needs help, who needs their story told. And I get to tell that story for them in front of a group of people. I really think that that's something that sometimes we kind of overlook that. We don't realize how important it is. But I respect so much the opinions of people just like you. When you're 18 and you're able to vote, you're going to get that opportunity to go and listen to somebody's story. And someone's going to say, I think that I need some help from this court. And that's my favorite part of my job, is when I get to do that for somebody. Yes, sir?
What do you got to do you be police?
Oh, what do you need to do to be a police officer? That's a good question. We need to get a police officer to come here and answer that question for you. Would you like to do that? We're going to get a police officer to answer that question. I don't know. I don't know. Yes, sir. You want to think about it for a little bit, and I'll come back to you?
Yes, I could be a policeman.
Oh, you want to be a policeman too? We're going to have to get a police officer out here. Let's see. Yes, sir.
What was your hardest subject?
My hardest subject was geometry. I remember geometry. I even remember my teacher's name. That was my hardest subject. See, this is why we need all of you great students to go into science. We need good scientists who are good at math. Let's see. You have a question? No, you don't have a question? Do you have a question? Okay. Do you want to come over here so that we can hear your question? One reason that I love to do this with you is I think it's so important to learn how to speak in public. And y'all do such a great job at it. I like to give y'all the microphone. Yes, ma'am.
Is your work hard?
Is my work hard? Yes, absolutely. I won't even hesitate. Yes. But you know what? I believe that regardless of whatever you decide to do, in order to do it well, it's hard. Your teachers work very, very hard. Your teachers think about you and what they're going to do for you after they leave here and they go home. And they wake up in the morning already thinking about the work they're going to do because they do such a great job. Any job that you do, I'll tell you right now, it's going to be difficult because working hard is difficult. But that doesn't mean it's not fun. It's exciting. Let's see. Yes, sir.
How old were you when you became an official lawyer?
How old was I when I became a lawyer? I was 24 years old. 24, let's see, 25. Now I have to do the math. I was 25 years old. I was 25 years old when I became a lawyer. So, yes. Who else? You want me to answer questions? See, the people in the front are going to get picked on over here. Do you have a question? Okay, what's your question? Do you want to stand up? No. I bet you could stand up. Handsome man. There you go. Yes, sir.
What was your favorite subject?
My favorite subject was English, and history. I loved English and I loved history. I still like to read books about history. Does anybody in here like history? Oh, isn't it interesting? I loved English and I loved history. Let's see, who else has a question? Let's see. Okay, yes, ma'am.
What did you like to do whenever you were in third grade?
When I was in the third grade, you know what? I remember my science project when I was in the third grade. When I was in Austin and I was in the third grade, I remember that I did a science project about salamanders. Does anybody here know what a salamander is? Have you ever cut a salamander and watch it grow back? That was my science project in the third grade, I remember. I think that was my favorite part of third grade, because it's what I remember. Let's see. We've already gone over there. Okay, you have a question? You want to stand up?
How many years have you been a lawyer?
How many years have I been a lawyer? Are you trying to figure out my age? I've been a lawyer 11 years. You know what? Then I must have started practicing law when I was 26. So 11 years. Yes, I was 26. I've been practicing 11 years. So how old am I? 37. That's right. Good job. Good job. Thanks. That was a very tricky way of getting at my age. I'm pretty impressed. Let's see. Oh, yes, ma'am.
How many cases did you solve?
How many cases have I solved? How many cases? You know what? I can't even count the number of cases that I've been involved with. I've been involved in hundreds and hundreds of lawsuits. Right now, I have a couple that are there's a lot of contention in the lawsuits, and I've been involved in lots of different kinds of lawsuits. I've represented individuals, so workers. I've represented companies. I've represented children. One thing that I do that I really enjoy doing, sometimes children get involved in lawsuits where maybe they were in a car wreck or something like that happens to them, and the court calls me and says, Maricela, we have an agreement, but we need a lawyer to make sure that it's in the best interest of the child. And I do that a lot, and I really enjoy that work. But I've been involved in hundreds and hundreds of lawsuits. Let's see, I think we already talked to you. We haven't spoken to you. Okay, you and then you. Yes, sir. You want to stand up?
When you started helping people?
Say that again.
When did you start helping people?
When did I start helping people? You know, I'm very lucky because I came from parents who believed in helping people. They believed that communities were about helping not just the people in your family, but also the people that lived around you, maybe the people in your church. And so I can't remember when I was not doing things to help people. I remember that we had an elderly woman who went to our church named Mrs. Peña. And I remember that we used to help Mrs. Peña, and she would come and stay with us when it was cold. And I was in charge of helping to get her food to her. My mom would give me responsibilities like that. So even before I became a lawyer, even when I was in the third grade and the fourth grade and the fifth grade, I was doing things to help people. Anybody in here do that? Help your neighbors? That's right, help your family members. That is so important. It's not something you have to wait until you're older. You can help people right now. Yes, sir.
How long have you been in college?
How long did I go to college? That's a good question. I went to college for 4 years. So I was in Boston for 4 years. And then after I graduated, I went to law school for 3 years. So it takes 7 years to become a lawyer. 7 years. Let's see. Who have we not spoken to? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
How old were you when you decided to be a lawyer?
How old was I when I decided to be a lawyer? You know what? I told this story 2 years ago, so I'm going to tell it very briefly because some of you have already heard it. I remember when I decided to become a lawyer. We had a friend in our family. I know I told you that my mom and my dad are not lawyers. I don't have any family members who are lawyers. But my mom had a friend named Annie who was a lawyer. And I remember Annie coming to our house, and she was talking to my parents, and I just thought she was the most amazing person. Such an amazing person, because she was small like me, but she was articulate, and she seemed intelligent. And after getting to know Annie, I decided that I wanted to be a lawyer. And I was probably maybe in the 2nd or 3rd grade, about your age, maybe even younger. And I just decided that that's what I wanted to do. And then what did I do? I set goals. I decided I had to do very well in school, study very hard, do my homework as soon as I got home so that I didn't procrastinate. And that's when I decided that one day I wanted to go to law school. Let's see, who have we not spoken to? We already spoke to you. Do we speak? Have you asked a question yet? You have not? Okay, do you want to stand up for me?
How would you feel if you lost the case?
Well, I can tell you that because it happened on Friday. On Friday, it wasn't a case, it was a hearing. On Friday, I was in a hearing in Austin, and it was a very important hearing on behalf of a client. And I stood in front of the judge, and I thought all of my arguments were correct, and she completely disagreed with me. And you know what I did? I said, "Thank you, Your Honor," and I took the order, and I took my loss, and I went back. But you know, sometimes it's days like that when you don't win your hearing or you don't win your case that makes me a stronger lawyer. It makes me a better lawyer, I think. And what was the most important about that hearing is the lawyer on the other side, the one that was arguing against me, called me and told me he was very impressed with my arguments. So being a lawyer means you have to accept that sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. And that's a very important lesson. I bet some of you play soccer or play kickball or other sports, and you love it when your team wins, don't you? But what about when your team loses? I know, but sometimes we have to learn to accept that loss. I have a 5-year-old little boy, and we play Connect 4, and he hates to lose. He hates it, but sometimes I say, "Tito, you have to learn how to lose. It's part of life, right? And that's okay." Let's see. Yes, ma'am. I'm going to stand up.
Have you ever got bored of being a lawyer?
Have I ever been bored being a lawyer? Boy, I don't know if I'm ever bored being a lawyer. The neat thing about law is that you get to read about and work on issues that are different every day. And so being a lawyer for me is not boring. Sometimes it's frustrating, and sometimes it's difficult, but I don't think it's boring. Let's see. Yes, sir.
To be a lawyer, what subject do you have to go to in college?
To be a lawyer, what do you have to study in college? That is a great question. The neat thing about being a lawyer is you can study whatever you want in college. You can study whatever you want. I studied business. I majored in business, but I know lawyers who studied history, English, biology. You can study whatever you want as long as you enjoy it. That's the most important. And then when you go to law school, they teach you about all the important parts of being a lawyer. So that's a very good question. Let's see. We already spoke. Let's see. We spoke. Oh, okay. You have a question? Yes, ma'am. You want to come out here?
What made you decide to be a lawyer?
I decided to be a lawyer, like I was telling earlier, because I met a lawyer that I thought was so impressive, and I realized that one of my skills was my ability to communicate in writing and to articulate in public speaking, and that's very important when you're a lawyer. Because one thing that really, what a lawyer is, it means that you're trying to speak for someone who may not be able to speak for themselves. It's trying to give a voice to somebody so that they have their rights protected when maybe they can't speak for themselves. Let's see, we've already spoken. We have some enthusiasm. No, we've already spoken. We have such great questions here today. Let's see, yes, sir. You want to stand up?
How did you become a lawyer?
By studying very hard. So in order to be a lawyer, what you do is you go to college, and then you go to law school, and then you have to take an exam. It's a 3-day exam. It lasts 3 days. And once you pass the exam, then you're a lawyer. That's how you do it. Study very hard, work very, very hard. Let's see, we've already spoken. Oh, you have a question. Yes, sir. You want to come stand up?
Was it hard for you or easy for you in college?
Was it hard or easy for me in college? That is a great question. Some of the subjects were very hard. I remember when I took economics. It was a pretty difficult subject. It was pretty difficult. It was pretty difficult. So sometimes it is hard when you're in college, but I worked very hard and I studied and I got through it and I did pretty well. But it certainly was not easy all the time. It was not easy. Let's see. Who else? Let's see. Do you want to come down here and yeah. I don't know if my microphone will reach that far. These are some great questions. The reason when I come here I enjoy letting you ask questions is I want to make sure that I can give you whatever information that you think will be helpful to you as you decide what you want to be when you grow up. And sometimes maybe I don't know what that is, but y'all have asked some really great questions. Yes, ma'am.
Did you ever get nervous when you talked to a judge?
Oh boy, yes. Did I ever get nervous? Let me tell you a story. I have a friend, one of my great friends and a mentor of mine, and I'm going to say his name. His name is Judge Eric Moyer. He is a wonderful mentor. To this day, I was in his court yesterday. To this day, when I am before Judge Moyer, I get nervous. And the reason I get nervous is that, in my opinion, when you go into a court of law, it's a very important environment. And I take very seriously what I do. So absolutely, I always have a little bit of nervousness when I'm before certain judges. But I take that nervousness and I try to make sure that it makes me more prepared. I make sure that when I go into court, I already have all the answers to the questions I think might be asked of me. And that's how I get through it. But absolutely, I do get nervous. Let's see. Yep. You want to come down here and ask a question? Yep. Such prepared students. You have questions written and everything.
I was wondering, what does JD mean?
Oh, that is a great question. So the question was, what does JD mean? The two letters that you see sometimes after someone's name, JD, mean Juris Doctorate. And what that means is Doctor of the Laws. So some people might say that a lawyer has a doctorate degree, and that's what it means, that they studied laws. That's what JD means, and that is a great question. It's a really good question. Let's see.
One more question.
Okay, one more question. Tom said, let's see, where are we going to get our last question? You guys have already spoken. Have I spoken to you? Okay, you're going to ask the last question. You want to come up here?
Did people say if you wouldn't go to college?
Say that again.
Did people say if you wouldn't go to college?
Did people tell me that I was not going to go to college? You know what? I wouldn't listen to anybody who told me that. I don't even know if anybody ever said that. And that's a really good question, and let's leave it with this. If there is anything you leave with today, regardless of anything else that I've said was of interest to you, do not let someone else tell you what you're capable of. Do not let someone tell you that you cannot be a lawyer because you're not a good reader, or that you cannot be a scientist because you're not good at math, or that you cannot go to college. Do not let someone tell you that. Every single student in this class, every single child that's in this auditorium, you can be a lawyer, a doctor, an architect, an engineer, and every single one of you will go to college. You will go to college. And I know it because just in our brief conversation here, you all are very bright students and obviously very hardworking. So I want you to take that to heart. Thank you for letting me come to speak with you again this year. I always enjoy it, and I'm always so impressed with the students here at San Francisco. Thank you.